Paulie Walnut Gualtieri, played by Tony Sirico, is a captain in the DiMeo crime family in HBO's smash hit mob drama The Sopranos. Eventually promoted to the position of captain and pretty much the only member of the original Sopranos crew from season 1 still alive by the end of the series, Paulie is a fan favourite character and by far one of the most colourful of the series. He's had encounters with the supernatural, he's got some of the best one-liners of the show, and he lived through the 70s by the skin of his nuts when the Columbos were going at it. Paulie is very petty though, and he can be a right snake, massively self-centered and abhorrently selfish, which often causes trouble for the family. This behaviour is perhaps never better encapsulated than the whole Ginny Sack joke incident in season 4. Ralph Cifaretto makes an inappropriate joke about Lupertazzi underboss Johnny Sack's wife in front of made men, a joke which little Paulie tells to Paulie, the latter of whom is doing a 4-month stint in jail. And for some reason Paulie, whether out of spite because of his jealousy of Ralph's capable earning abilities, his frustration that no one has come to visit him in the can or provide support to his mother, the fact that he is just a vile person, or maybe a combination of all three plus more, decides to leak this information to Johnny Sack himself, causing an outrageous scandal that leads to almost the clipping of Ralph, the clipping of Johnny Sack, and even the clipping of Carmine Lupertazzi Sr., old fish lips himself, but eventually things are settled between all parties. This sparks the beginning of a beautiful relationship between Johnny Sack and Paulie once he's released from prison. Frustrated and feeling like he's been marginalised, Paulie expresses his woes to a receptive Uncle Johnny, who is only too eager to have Paulie cry on his shoulder. Paulie whines and moans, and in his many meetings with Johnny he lets slip crucial information that gives the Lupertazzis the edge over the Sopranos in many of their business dealings, and this kind of behaviour, if caught, could easily mean Paulie ends up in the sea with his old friend Pussy. Johnny is sympathetic to Paulie's misfortunes, but in spite of his pretense of not sticking his beak in, we all know what's going on here. He's blowing smoke up Paulie's ass so he can use the guy for information. He's playing him for a fool. Paulie asks how Carmine, Johnny's boss, is doing, and hilariously Johnny tells Paulie that he asks about him, and even more hilariously Paulie buys it, even being touched by the notion. Paulie continues to be buttered up by Johnny, and his behaviour in the family becomes even worse, lashing out at Sylvia for example, calling him a wormy cocksucker. Evidently Paulie is having delusions of grandeur, fantasizing about the near future where he might switch families and have a rank in the Lupertazzi crew, or maybe even take Tony's seat as Sopranos boss. After all, no one knows what the future holds, my friend. Speaking of which, in the episode Eloise, season 4, episode 12, Paulie spots Carmine at a wedding and approaches him to pay his respects. But it's clear just a few seconds in that Carmine has no idea who Paulie is. The poor old guy looks very confused, and to pinpoint Paulie's identity, he asks if his father was run over by a trolley. It's a great moment in the show that serves to highlight how Johnny Sack has been lying to Paulie about Carmine asking for him. Clearly, he doesn't even know him. And after this, Paulie gets embarrassed and literally takes a good long look at himself in the mirror and goes back to kissing Tony's ass, even murdering an old lady to steal her money, which he gives to Tony to rejuvenate the boss's confidence in him. Before he meets Carmine, Paulie struts like he's the Teflon Don, a cunning beast 10 steps ahead of everyone, but it goes back to Junior's saying, some people are so far behind in the race that they actually believe they're leading. It's a fantastic little subplot, but a question does arise. How could Carmine not know who Paulie was? As highlighted in the show, Paulie goes way back into the family, to Johnny Boy's days, Tony's father. He's one of the most senior members of the family, and Carmine even knows guys like Ralph in the Sopranos crew, so how could he not know who Paulie was? Wouldn't they have seen each other at weddings, funerals, meetings between the families? The two families have done business for years. Is this a plot hole? Is he just old and confused? That is a possibility, of course. But ultimately it's not relevant because the scene exists to show us that Paulie realizes he's been duped by the highly manipulative Johnny, but it's interesting to discuss. Before we continue, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the channel and hit the notification button so you don't miss out on future videos. So first of all, using Carmine's knowledge of Ralph cannot be used as evidence as to why Carmine should have known who Paulie was. Yes, Paulie was higher up in the family than Ralph, but Carmine would have known Ralph because of Ralph's supervision of the highly profitable Esplanade construction racket, which the Lupertazzis were involved in, whereas Paulie has no connection to New York aside from his little meetings with Johnny Sack. In fact, in an early episode, when Ralph speaks to Johnny about possibly switching families, Johnny even tells him Carmine doesn't know who you are, highlighting how if you're a soldier in the Sopranos crew and you aren't making New York any money, you're not anything to Carmine. Is it feasible that Carmine didn't recognize Paulie? Well, think of it this way. Carmine has great disdain for the New Jersey mob. He's referred to them in the past as a glorified crew. Carmine himself, on the other hand, is a boss of one of the most powerful New York crime families. He would want the least possible amount of interactions with New Jersey as possible. In fact, in one of the follow-up dinners with the Sopranos, Carmine has Johnny speak on his behalf when discussing the Esplanade to Tony, when Tony, who is a boss of course, Carmine's equal in rank, is just sitting right there not saying anything. That could be seen as disrespect, but it highlights Carmine's place in the hierarchy and his attitude to New Jersey. Who is Paulie? Paulie is a foot soldier in this glorified crew, an enforcer with a low profile, no wife, no kids, old car, small condo. We've never seen him take place in a meeting with New York, so to say that him and Carmine would have met in the past is just speculation. He was just another DiMeo goon for years until Tony took over the family and Paulie got a bump in rank. There's probably 100 guys like Paulie working for the Lupratazis. And even if Carmine has run into Paulie in the past, how is he supposed to remember just one of the many insignificant mobsters he's met in his life? What has Paulie ever done in his life that would put him on Carmine's radar? And even if they have met, no one in Jersey matters to Carmine except Tony, because Tony's the boss. And maybe Junior, given his history and that he's technically the boss of the family. Take note of the sit-down between Carmine and Tony regarding the HUD business. When they greet, Carmine doesn't even acknowledge the existence of Christopher. Carmine and Paulie are from two completely different planets. Whilst Carmine is maneuvering schemes involving millions of dollars, Paulie is hitting gardeners over the head with shovels and strangling old ladies. However, when re-watching the show, you do see scenes where Paulie and Carmine are in the same room, such as the party after Christopher gets made. Carmine even sits behind Paulie at one point. This suggests that, far more interestingly, Carmine maybe did recognize Paulie, but chose not to validate him. Interestingly, as a captain, Paulie broke mafia protocol by talking directly to the boss of another family instead of going through a middleman. Clearly, he had his head in the skies, thinking Carmine would greet him like a brother-in-law. Carmine had every right to be pissed that some random glorified crew member started kissing him and touching him up when he's at a wedding with his family. Paulie had no right to do what he did. So perhaps pretending that he didn't know Paulie was Carmine's way of saying, piss off, you're insignificant. Also, who goes up to a mobster at a wedding and unloads his verbal diarrhea? Carmine is an old guy, an old boss, and he must have gotten to that stage using intelligence, wisdom, and precaution. With Paulie spilling his beans in front of him, in front of Carmine's family at a wedding, who knows what the implications are? He has to protect himself, to play dumb. What if someone at the wedding heard something they shouldn't have? What if Paulie was weighing a wire for the feds? Even Pussy showed more subtlety when he was fishing for information when weighing a wire. In fact, Paulie is lucky that Carmine didn't make a beef with Tony about one of his guys approaching him in a public space. That would have gotten Paulie into a lot of trouble. Tony would have gotten very suspicious, and if Johnny ever let Tony know who was running him information after Paulie outlived his usefulness, you can pretty much guarantee that Gualtieri would have been a dead man. Paulie is extremely lucky that this situation never got back to him. By feigning that he doesn't know who Paulie is, Carmine follows mob protocol and keeps himself insulated as a boss. Even if he did know who Paulie was, he's Jersey muscle. Who cares who he is? Carmine would lower himself if he acknowledged Paulie and started hugging and kissing him. Protocol is a big deal in the mob, and Carmine would have no business dealing with mobsters in Paulie's position in his own family, let alone another family, let alone this pygmy thing over in Jersey. Even Uncle Junior, when talking to Richie Aprile, puts Jackie Jr. in his place when he opens his mouth out of turn and says, "Who's that speaking here? Is somebody speaking?" Then you have Johnny Sack lashing out when Christopher talks too much. It seems the phrase, "know your place," means a great deal in the mob. So what do you make of Carmine not recognizing Paulie? Do you think he genuinely didn't know, or was it an act? Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe for more videos, and thanks for watching.